Hello, my name is Simon Hurst and I'm the Honorary Architect of the Art Workers Guild here in Queen Square in Bloomsbury. And number 6, which you can see in the middle of this shot, is our building. As you can see, it's a London townhouse, originally dating from 1713 but refaced in the 19th century with a more modern door case and slimmer glazing bars to the sash windows. And we'll look at some of these in more detail as we go through the building. And as we walk towards the building, you might be able to see there's a ghost sign up between the first and second floor windows, and we think that relates to its previous incarnation as a printing works for Ackerman Press back in the 19th century and right through to about 1913 when the Art Workers Guild purchased the property. As we look down on the ground floor, you'll see we have 2 lanterns outside the front which I designed a few years ago as part of our works to kind of give ourselves more of a street presence. We've always had this asphalt and Carrara marble inset AWG logo on the floor, but we thought that it'd be quite nice to add something that gives us a bit more of a statement, and these are lit up when we have meetings. And architecturally they're obelisks sitting on ball feet and with lanterns which have a nod to the arts and crafts, but they do fit in with the rest of the street where we have obelisks and also lights over the park. So starting off at the front door, we'll go and enter and have a tour of the inside. So here we are, we've come in through the front door, and very much largely this is part of the 1713 original fit out with the niches, the cornice with its enriched mouldings and egg and dart. And the only modern interventions we think are the 2 double doors here going through, which are part of the Art Workers Guild 1913 modifications, and we have a light fitting with the AWG which was made by past master Anthony Ballantyne. And as we move through, you'll see we have the original 1713 staircase and all the panelling that goes up right to the top of the building. And we'll go upstairs now and start on the first floor where we have a couple of rooms which I'd like to show you. So we're moving up. As you can see, we've got the barley twist spindles, very finely carved open string, and you'll get a little glimpse out here of something which we'll see a bit later, which is the new glazed roof over the courtyard that links the rear and front buildings. And as we go round to the first floor, we have 2 rooms which are open to the public for hirings, and one of those is the library, which we'll be going into next. So here we are on the first floor, and this is the library, and this has only just been refitted this year actually with new bookcases that I've designed and house all the books that we have in our collection. There's a few more bookcases over here, and all the books are either by brothers of the Art Workers Guild or about brothers of the Art Workers Guild, so there's a strong theme tying them all together. And this room is part of the original 1713 scheme, with some of the original panelling is surviving, as you might be able to see if I zoom in here, look, and the cornice is actually very recently replaced in fibrous plaster. It would have had a timber box cornice as we have in other parts of the original building, but that would have been stripped out in the early 19th century when the room was modernised, and I think the panelling was actually all flushed out as it was seen as being rather old-fashioned, and in fact the fireplace wall still is completely flush, and the panelling is probably hiding underneath layers of canvas and paint. And the fireplace again is probably dating from the early 19th century, as is the sash window with its fine glazing bars, unlike the original ones which are much thicker and we can see in other parts of the building. And actually, as we're here, we might as well look down on the new glazed roof of the courtyard, which we will see as we go downstairs. So now we move through from the library to the front room on the first floor, and this is what we call the gradage room, and as you can see is set up at the moment for boardroom conference setup, but also is used for lectures, and we have a pull down screen at one end. Now the mouldings of this room, the dado, skirting, they're all from the original 1713 period, but again it had an early makeover in the 19th century with a Regency fireplace and also a Regency cornice, which is being restored now to reveal the little paterae, which are all gooped up in paint. It's looking rather splendid. And then the frames and shutters of the windows are the original Burgundy sash windows, as you can see, a very fine, delicate early 19th century. And as we look around the room, you'll get a better view of the table, which was made by a furniture maker, brother of the guild, called Martin Grierson. And if we move around to see other brothers' works in this room, we can see, as we saw earlier, a trompe-l'oeil painted register grate with plate, and that was painted by Rosalind Bliss in 2006. So while we're still in the gradage room, here is the plaque dedicated to Roderick Gradage, 1929 to 2000. He was the honorary architect here from 1989 right through to his death, and was indeed master in 1985, and was a very good architect, actually, rather underrated. A big fan of Lutyens when Lutyens was unfashionable, and helped raise him back to prominence, and did a lot of good work in the very arts and crafts idiom himself, and was a very valued brother and master of the Artworkers Guild. So we're now leaving the first floor, and we'll go back down to the ground floor via the entrance hall. And we're going to turn back on ourselves as we're going to leave the 1713 building and move through to part that was actually built purposefully for the Guild in 1914. So we're about to enter the courtyard here. So we're in what we call the courtyard space, which has been glazed over, and we'll talk about it a bit later. But I'll concentrate first of all on the purpose-built part of the building the Architect's Guild created back in 1914 to make this their home. And these double doors lead through to the rear hall, which we'll go to next. So through a lobby, and then this room is quite a surprise to anyone who hasn't seen it. So considering we're just a normal width frontage of townhouse, this is surprisingly wide, and that's because back in the late 19th century, when the printing works were here, they managed to buy a bit of the strip of the garden next door on the right hand side of this room to make a much wider plot for their printing works. And obviously the Guild saw the opportunity when they bought this in 1913 to create a purposeful meeting room for them. So here we are, the purpose-built lecture hall of the Artworkers Guild, dating from 1913 to 1914. Interesting thing to note are this rather large glazed lantern on the top, which is a reinforced concrete structure of the flat parts with the beams, and then timber lantern on top. And fireplace at the end, and a painting which you can see as one of the inaugural meetings of the Artworkers Guild. And although you probably can't see it in the picture, the very same little lectern that sits on top of the table, and in fact the table itself, are the very same ones that you can see here. So that goes back right back to the founding of the Guild in 1884. So while we're at the front, you can see it's set up with a dais for the master to sit in the middle. Every year we have a master that's in charge of proceedings. This year it's Alan Powers, and he'll continue through to 2021. And his secretaries would sit left and right of him. And behind him is the panel on which all the masters' names, going back to the very beginning, are painted. And above that you'll see, if I can zoom in, our motto, which is Art is Unity. And above that, William Morris, 1892, that was his year as master of the Guild. So zooming back out, we had the masters listed behind the master's chair, and as you'll see there's also a frieze of painted names going all the way around the room. So they're all the brothers of the Artworkers Guild, going right back to the very beginning, starting there, and it goes all the way around the room and continues on in other parts of the building. Now you might notice, if I zoom in on one panel, that some of the names are white and some of the names are gold. Well, everyone is painted in white when they become a member, and if they've paid their dues right up to the end, they get gilded. Otherwise it's eternal shame. So a little bit about this painting, painted in 1909, which was 25 years after the founding of the Art Workers Guild in 1884. It was founded by 25 painters, architects, sculptors and other craftsmen. It's an indication of 5 young architects who had been meeting for a year previously, and they joined a group called the 15 to form the Art Workers Guild. Those 5 founders were William Letherby, Gerald Horsley, who's pictured here, along with 3 former pupils of Richard Norman Shaw, being Edward Pryor, Mervyn McCartney and Ernest Newton. And they, as in this painting, hired Clifford's Inn Hall as one of their places to have their meetings, as well as Barnard's Inn. And they managed in 1913 to club together through money just donated by brothers to actually buy this building and create their own purpose-built meeting room. And that's been its home ever since. So, what is the purpose of the Art Workers Guild? Well, as I said, it was founded in 1884, and its purpose really was to advance the education in all visual arts and crafts and to foster and maintain high standards of design and craftsmanship in a way that may be beneficial to the community. Quite a wide aim, but clearly it was largely made up of architects, and in those times, of course, craftsmanship was intrinsic to all parts of architecture, and so it made sense to collaborate with other craftspeople, letter cutters, stained glass artists, carvers, you name it. And that still goes on to this day, where there's a lot of cross-fertilisation between members giving each other commissions or helping each other and collaborating in artistic endeavours. So let's look at the busts going around the room. So these are past masters, starting off with William Morris there in 1892. And they have Selwyn Image, Charles Harrison Townsend, Mervyn McCartney, William Strang, Letherby, and then I'm focusing on one in particular, and that is Francis Troop. And here he is, commemorated as Master of the Guild in 1923. He was also the Guild Secretary from 1909 through to 1917, the period when this property was bought and refitted, and he was the architect for it. He built Blackfriars House, which is now a hotel, and worked for several other architects. He was a real arts and crafts architect, very hands-on, and was very gifted in leadwork. And we'll come and see some of that obsession with leadwork when we move through to the courtyard in a minute. But he's responsible for all the works, designing this hall, and all the alterations around the building to make it in what it is today. So, we're now moving through from the lecture hall into what we call the Yellow Gallery. And this is the rear closet wing of the original Queen Anne building. And as you can see, lots of original features. You've got this rather fine arch all in timber, and the original timber box cornice, and all the panelling on the walls. And then if we look back, you'll see that we have display cabinets which complete the room as a gallery. We often have changing exhibitions 4 or 5 times a year with members' works and other related subjects. And this room forms a link between the original front room, and which is a sort of reception room, and the hall. And up until the time of the glazing over the courtyard, which we'll see outside, that was open to the elements, and therefore wasn't very much used as a circulation space. And we'll come and explain a bit more about the way that's transformed the circulation a bit later on in this little tour. So, moving through from the Yellow Gallery, we go through the service staircase, which is all original, panelled, including rather posh timber boxed cornice for a service staircase and spindles. And then we move through into the front of the building. So again, we're still all within the 1713 part, and this room here still exhibits its original panelling and timber cornice, and has been fitted out with a sort of bar servery area, which I designed back in 2011 when I first became Honorary Architect, and is used for refreshments and serving food, and still has an original fire surround actually, so there you are. But then when we move through to the very front room, of course this was modernised when the whole frontage was given a facelift in the early 19th century. This whole room got a complete makeover, so it may have its original door, or at least one of them, but the rest of it, the windows, the cornice and the fireplace, are all very much in a sort of modern early 19th century form. And you'll notice that this room also has a frieze. We mentioned that the hall has all the names of brothers as they join. Well, we're moving more up to date because we filled the hall up years ago, and then we've started actually progressing around this room, and we've got to here with some blank space for future brothers. And zooming out, you'll see this room set up with an exhibition at the moment, and that is the current master, Alan Powers, has curated this during his year as master, and all the works are by brothers of the Art Workers Guild from over the years, which he's been collecting for many, many decades, and some very fine works there are too. This room has just been redecorated as it happens. It's had a sort of makeover. We've had some trompe-l'oeil marble painted below the dado rail, and we've picked out the cornice just to kind of give the room a bit more of a sense of importance, and create a sort of good background really for exhibitions, meetings, etc. So we're going to leave the master's room at the front, part of the oldest part of the building, and move through to one of the newest parts. So back through the stair hall and down the corridor. What would have been a little backyard, and in fact up into a few years ago that's exactly what it was. Had no covering across the top, it got very wet, never got any sunlight, very green and damp. And one of my first jobs as honorary architect was to create a scheme to roof this over, and so it has a glazed roof, and the whole structure of it is all cast iron. So we have these cast iron ribs which echo the arch of the original Troop designed entrance to the hall from the courtyard. And I mentioned he was a keen lead worker, and we can see some examples of that. Clearly, whether it was his own hand, I doubt it, but he relished details of his little lead cloak that runs around the canopy, and in fact all the little details, even the lead soil pipes, have very lovely little details like this on the ears of the fixings. And as we zoom out, I'll show you more of the roof structure above. So have this curved glass roof, barrel vaulted. The corbels actually do corbel out of the brickwork and support the gutters that run down each side. And then we have it's all naturally ventilated, so it's not a heated space. It provides ventilation to lots of the rooms at lower level, and so we have these glass louvers with sort of clerestory running along, and these are actually fused layers of 3mm glass. So there's 8 layers all together, melted together, and that naturally captures little bubbles within the layers and gives us sort of obscuration. You don't be able to see what's going on next door, and I think it worked quite well. And then we have some of Troop's ancillary blocks here with that casement window, and then I created this stone arch as part of the design to get a disabled access through to the hall, because we only had steps through all the doorways into the hall, and now we have this ramp that was squeezed in through a cupboard area and links the hall to a disabled access WC, which we have on the other side there. And there you are, you can see the plaque commemorating the opening of it in 2018 by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. So a little final roundup really. So I mentioned we've got some of the original sash windows, so here we are. These are from the 1713 rear closet wing, all with their thick overload glazing bars, and then through to 1914 with the work by Troop, and then finishing off with the work in 2018 by myself creating the roof. So a long and interesting history over the last 300 or so years, and I hope you've enjoyed this little tour of the Art Workers Guild.